Hi everyone, I hope you're doing good, and in this video we're going to talk about how we can achieve the audit trail in Oracle database. Now, if you're based out of India, there is a regulation which came back in 1st April 2023, which requires every company which is registered under the Companies Act 2013 to maintain an audit trail on the applications on which books of accounts are maintained. Uh, Through some FAQ, it was also clarified that the audit trail is required at both the layers. One is the application layer and the second one is the database layer. Now, in the database layers, there are a majority of the databases, like there is Microsoft SQL Server, very popular. If you are using an SAP product, then SAP S4 HANA's database, that is also very popular. And I think so Oracle database is very also popular because we have various products associated with it. You can have SAP with the Oracle database, you can have Oracle EBS there on premise, there is also Oracle JD Edwards, and there are other few applications as well which can use the Oracle database. So I thought of making this video because in Oracle things are not as straightforward if you compare it with probably even Microsoft SQL Server. I had a video prepared for that, you can check it on my YouTube channel. And even in the case of S4 HANA, it is pretty straightforward, but in the Oracle it has some complexities. So I have just prepared a work program, so let's just go through it. So yeah, in Oracle there are, if I want to tell, there are totally 5 ways to establish audit trail. We'll go one by one. What is the difference that we will just identify. First one is the traditional and standard auditing. Now this was introduced back in Oracle release 6, and if you ask me, it is available only in 21C, right? So the latest release of Oracle, which is release 23, the traditional auditing is not supported, or the Oracle, it is depreciated. Oracle is recommending people to move from the traditional or the standard auditing to unified auditing. So yeah, but if you are using probably Oracle 11G and 12, where the unified auditing is not yet available, traditional auditing is one of the area you can look for to enable the auditing. Okay, the second one is the unified auditing. Now this is a very popular, and as on date of the recording of this video, Oracle is recommending that unified auditing. As the word suggests, unified, even before the unified auditing which was introduced in 12C, there are many audit trails. So there was a traditional auditing which was sitting in one table, there was a sys based auditing which was sitting in one table, there is a fine grade auditing which is sitting in one table. Unified auditing combines all the auditing into one singular table or a view. So that is the reason this new feature is pretty powerful, and it was released in 12C, and in 23C it is the something which is Oracle is recommending, because traditional and standard auditing is now depreciated and de-supported by Oracle. Third one is the fine grained auditing. Now, to give you example why there is a need of fine grained auditing, because we already have traditional auditing, we already have unified auditing, why there is a need. So this was again available from Oracle release 10G, so much way before introduced than the unified auditing. It is more basically on the conditions. Suppose for example I have a table called as employees. Now there are multiple employees, I want to audit, let's say, only a particular employee, right? Let's say employee whose ID is 2, and only when one of the column of the table, let's say salary column, is getting changed, right? Now in such scenarios, if I want to audit only a specific subject to certain conditions, that's where fine grained comes into picture. Because in traditional auditing, or even in the case of unified auditing, you don't have any kind of flexibility of telling the database that I want to audit only a particular column of a table, a particular row of the table. So that kind of fine grained policies you can make under the fine grained auditing. Trigger based, if you are aware, trigger is something which is very common across databases. You can find it in S4 HANA database, Oracle database, or even the Microsoft SQL Server database. So triggers is can be one of the ways where you can create the triggers, update triggers, and delete triggers, and you can have history or shadow tables where all the old values mentioned and the live database. I believe the trigger is probably not recommended in the case of a very large database where the volume is large, because it will have an impact on the performance of the database. There are other mechanisms, PAM tools, like the privilege identity or privilege access management tools. Some of them popular are Arcos, which is widely used in banks or BFSI sector. There is also an Irage tool and CyberArk. These are the leading PAM tools. They offer the text keystroke based logging, so whatever the commands you are executing, that is getting logged along with the video recording sessions. And we also have the Oracle Vault. It's a specific tool for the purpose of capturing the audit logs. In this video we are not covering the other mechanisms because PAM and Oracle Vault is very application specific. If you, not every entity or not every company who using the Oracle database are going to um, opt for this mechanism because it obviously result in additional cost, but rather they would like to achieve the compliance or objective with the default mechanisms, which are the four: the traditional auditing, the unified auditing, the fine grained auditing, and the trigger based auditing. So in this video we're going to dive down into all these four methods. I will probably also show you a practical demo how to see how to create the policies and all. So let's start with the traditional auditing. We'll start first with traditional auditing, then we will jump to fine grained auditing. We'll skip unified auditing. We will take it later, and then trigger based auditing, and last we will take the unified auditing. Okay. Before even going into each of these methods, let's just go through what is the main difference and what are the key points, what are the key tables we need to take into consideration between all these four methods, right? Now, as I earlier mentioned, traditional auditing was enabled or introduced in 21C, sorry, release 6, and it is available only till 21C. In release 23, it is getting deprecated by the Oracle. While the unified auditing is something which the Oracle is recommending and pushing people to use that, and it is available from release 12C. Now these versions are very important because if you are having Oracle 11G and if you are trying to implement unified auditing, that's not going to work because unified auditing was not even introduced in 11G. It is not even applicable to 11G. It was introduced in 12C. So ensure these versions are, and whatever the database you have or your client has, it is as per this and it is aligned with this. Fine grained auditing was introduced in release 10G. Triggers is something which is available right from the start, probably version 7, and those are available from the inception. Now, as I mentioned, what is the difference? What is the crux between this all these methods? So, traditional auditing and standard auditing, there are three ways to tell the database what to audit. So there is statement level auditing, there is object level auditing, and there is privilege level auditing. To give you a brief about what is the difference between three, in statement level auditing you are telling the database that what kind of statements you want to audit. You want to audit insert statement, you want to audit update statement, or a delete statement. Okay, and these are applicable for users. So in statement level auditing, right, you can specify the users but you cannot specify the tables. So if you specify, let's say, this one user and then the insert update delete activities, then those are going to applicable for all the tables. Opposite of it, let's say for example the entity don't want to audit all the tables but only certain tables, because ideally the requirement is only the tables forming part of books of accounts. In Oracle database there might be thousands of tables, and out of those thousands of tables there will be some key tables on which the financial data or books of accounts are maintained. Only for that tables the auditor is required as per the requirement. So for example, if entity wants to audit, let's say, only 50 tables, so they shall use the object level auditing, where for each of the table they can configure which kind of commands you want to audit. And privilege level auditing is something I have not seen enough for the rule 11G requirement, but what exactly it means is that you can tell the database what kind of privileges you want to audit. So what I mean by privileges I want to audit is that if I, let's say for example, tell the database that I want to audit all the activities which are done by all the users on all the tables using insert table privilege. So every user or on every database, if it is doing any kind of insert activity on a table, that will get captured. But majority of the time it is either a statement level auditing or a object level auditing, which I have seen in the traditional auditing to comply with the rule 11G requirement. Second one is the unified auditing. Now, as I mentioned before, unified auditing was even introduced, there were multiple ways where the auditor was stored. Traditional auditing, there was fine grained auditing, and there was sys-based auditing. The main crux or the main purpose of unified auditing is combine all this into three. I think so, one image. Yeah. So there was a fine grained auditing, there was a standard auditing, and sys-based auditing, and all it is getting combined in under the unified auditing. So there is only one table or view which you can look for, rather than going through all the three tables in the case of standard auditing. Fine grained auditing, I think so. We already explained that if you want to be very specific on any column or any kind of conditions, you can go for the fine grained auditing. Triggers, again, I believe I have explained that it creates a shadow and history tables. And in all this, like traditional auditing, unified auditing and fine grained auditing, you will mostly get an SQL text. What is the command which has been executed by that user, right? Trigger can be only the way by which you can establish a old value, because see, in SQL test it may be or may not be possible to capture the old value of the field. Let's say for example, a salary of an employee under the employees table was 20,000. I updated it to 30,000. Okay, now in this probably I will just get a statement where 30,000 is mentioned. That is a new value can be captured through SQL test. But through triggers we can kind of establish old value which was 20,000 as well as 30,000. So that is a main advantage of trigger, but the down con is that it has a huge impact performance of the database, so not very much recommended for a huge complex volume data. What is the initialization parameter? So audit underscore trail. So initialization parameter, just treat it as a step one to enable the audit, right? In every databases, in most of the database, this is always a two-step audit activity. You need to enable a global parameter or an initialization parameter, and then you need to tell the database what exactly you want to audit. That is nothing but the audit policy. So initialization parameter in the case of traditional auditing is audit underscore trail. In the case of unified auditing is unified auditing. In fine grained and in trigger based, there is no initialization parameter. From the auditor perspective, we are also very much interested when the audit trail was enabled, right? So if there are any changes made to this initialization parameter, can we capture the logs? And the motive of this is we want to be this logs to be default, right? Yeah, it can be configured, but it is always better from the auditor perspective these things are on default, because then even if let's say the client has not enabled this kind of logs, the database is capturing that. So in case of traditional auditing, if the audit underscore trail parameter is changed, you can get the date or the time when this changed or when this enabled. So in Oracle there is something called as alert logs. So alert logs are nothing but a kind of default auditing done on every alter statement. So in order to set even the audit underscore trail parameter, alter statement is getting used, right? So if you pass a alter statement, it will capture a log. We will be seeing that in the practical demo as well, but yeah, you can capture the logs, and these are default in nature. In unified auditing also, if you change the initialization parameter, you can get the logs. FGA and trigger based, there is no initialization parameter, so no, this is not applicable. Next step this is the step one of the initialization parameter. Next step is audit policies. So in traditional and standard auditing, if so audit policies is required in unified auditing, in traditional and even in the FGA, right? Now as far as changes in audit policies is also important, because actually it's a two-step, right? So your audit trail is going to be effective only when you are creating or enabling the audit policy. So one of the aspect from the auditor's perspective which we want to comment is also the tampering of the audit trail, whether it was disabled during the audit period. So disabling of audit trail can result in either disabling of the initialization parameter or probably removing, dropping or deleting even the audit policy, right? So if let's say audit policies are changed, they are disabled, they are deleted, how can we get the logs? So in case of traditional and standard auditing, it is not possible unless you have the version of 19.26, because I think in 19.26 they have introduced a new kind of audit policy which is mandatory and which is always enabled. But if you have a version which is less than 19.26, in based on whatever the understanding I have obtained from the web as on date, as there is no way to find out any changes in the audit policy. But this is not the case in case of unified auditing. In unified auditing always captures whatever the changes which has been made to the audit policy. So that's a great, and that is the majority of the features from the rule 11G requirement are fulfilled in unified auditing, and that is the way Oracle is also pushing users to use it. In case of fine grained auditing, so this again depends upon whether the unified auditing is enabled or not. If the unified auditing is enabled, right, we will see that what do you mean by unified auditing, pure mode and mixed mode. But if it is enabled, then you can get any changes in the audit policy. But yeah, if it is not enabled, then in case of FGA as well, since it's like a part and parcel of traditional auditing, any change in the audit policies are not maintained. In case of trigger based auditing, yeah, this is also a concern in case of triggers, because triggers once created can be modified, can be deleted, can be disabled, right? So we can get the creation date, but we can also get the modified date, but that's a false positive. Even if we change the trigger name, it will capture that last modification date. So yeah, if you drop the trigger, if you delete the trigger, or if you disable the trigger, if you re-enable the trigger, by default there is no logs available. For that you need to create a DDL trigger. So two kind of triggers, one is a DMA triggers for DML activities, and one is a DDL trigger for any changes in the trigger configuration. So that is something which is not default in nature. One need to create or configure that DDL trigger. There are some tables which are very important, which will store all the audit logs. Now in traditional auditing we will see that in detail. There are multiple ways to store the audit. You can store it at a database level, you can store it at a OS level. At OS also there are two ways, one is the plain text and one is an XML text. So in case of databases, the table is sys.aud$ and a view of it is db underscore audit trail. In case of OS, it is depending on the path which we are feeding in the audit underscore file underscore dest parameter. In case of XML, we have a dedicated table called as v.xml underscore audit underscore trail. So we will see that in practical how this table is going to work. In unified auditing is audit.sys.aud$unified, or majority of the times we are going to use the view which is called as unified underscore audit underscore trail. In case of fine-grained auditing, if it again depends whether the unified auditing is enabled or not, because if the unified auditing is enabled and you are creating a fine-grained audit policies, all the audit logs are going to move to the unified audit trail, because that's the main motive of unified audit trail. But let's say if unified audit trail is not enabled, this is the table sys.fga underscore log dollar or a db underscore fga underscore audit underscore trail. That's a view where we can see the audit logs. In trigger based auditing, it's always depending upon the trigger configuration. So as I mentioned earlier, there is always a live or a main table, and there is a history or shadow table. So all the audit logs are maintained in that history slash shadow tables, which are configured in the trigger configuration. Okay, so I think so that's the main difference between all these four methods. This is very important because one can get very confused between which one gets applicable. What is the main difference? Why Oracle created this three ways to establish the audit trail. Okay, now we will start with first the traditional auditing or a standard auditing. This is kind of uh, complex, but I will try to give you the understanding in layman language as early possible. Okay, so okay, I will just go directly in the practical version that makes more sense. So I have already in Oracle SQL developer. We can see here there are two databases. One is the pluggable databases where we are using sys user, and one is the user called as click, and again another user. Um, and also I have the SQL plus, which I already connected to the as a sysdba. Okay, now to check, first of all, so this video is more from the auditor perspective. I'm not going to show you the implementation. There will be some glimpse of how to implement auditor, but not a fully implementation demo. So yeah, from the auditor perspective, what we should check is that first thing is that whether the audit trail parameter, the audit underscore trail is the initialization parameter, that is enabled or not. Now there are two ways to check. If you are in OS, we just put show parameter audit. So I'm gonna go to the SQL plus and put this show parameter audit. Now you can see there are many parameters, so we'll go one by one. What is the definition of these parameters? So the main parameter is the third parameter, which is audit underscore trail. So this is the initialization parameter for standard auditing, which is set to none, right? There can be multiple values, we will go through that, but yeah, this is done. That means the audit trail is not enabled. Okay, there is another way to check this. So I will just put this is the basically SQL command, and let's go to the pluggable database and run this. The audit underscore trail is set to none. Okay, now you see there are many parameters. What the meaning of this parameters? So let's just go through that. Yeah, so the first parameter is audit underscore trail. Now what this talks about is the initialization parameter, and there are many possible values, right? As you can see, there is none, there is db extended, xml extended, and OS. Now what is the differentiation between these parameters is that none, as the word suggests, none. That means the audit underscore trail parameter is not set. That means the audit trail is not in place. DB and DB extended, the difference is that the both these parameters indicating that the audit trail is going to stored in database. But in DB comma extended, SQL text is one of the key column which is also maintained. Now SQL text column is will include all the commands which has been executed by the database users. XML and XML extended, again it is stored on the OS rather than the DB in the XML format, and also the difference between XML and extended, XML extended is similar to DB and DB extended, where in extended the SQL underscore text column is available. And last is OS, where the audit records are stored on the OS path in the plain text format. Now auditors should capture who, what, when. So all these parameters by taken into consideration. DB extended and XML extended is something the recommended values, because only in these two parameters or the value in these two cases the SQL text column is something which is very important, which is maintained. In rest of the parameters like DB and OS, the SQL underscore text column is not maintained. Now next parameter is audit underscore file underscore destination, very important. Now what it says is that it is the file path where the audit trail records are stored. So it's usually the OS path. Now this parameter is applicable when, let's say, the audit trail is set to last three, that is XML, XML extended and OS, because in the last three parameters the audit trail is somewhere sitting at a OS level, right? And the path at which these audit records are stored is can be set to audit underscore file destination, for which there is also a third parameter, audit underscore sys operations. Now this has to be always true, and by default value of this is always true. Now the very important factor in audit underscore file underscore destination parameter is that apart from the regular audit trail, it is also captures the sys-based audit trail. Now what is a sys-based auditing is nothing but an Oracle, right? There is a super user called as sys, which is having all the privileges, and any activities done through sys users are mandatorily recorded under the sys-based. I will probably just show you the SQL plus, and once I exit it, I just run to the SQL plus and I will just log in. Whenever I log in, it asks me the username. So I type the sys as sysdba. So I'm putting the username and as well as also the privileges which I'm going to use, and post that I will just enter the password. And once the password has been entered, I will connect it to the Oracle databases. Now any activities done by sys user in sysdba privileges or even in sysopper privileges, the auditor is something which will be stored at OS level, and the path of which will be configured under the audit underscore file underscore destination. Very very important. Many of the auditors don't take into consideration this, because even if I do any kind of activity through sys, this is not something which is stored under db underscore audit trail. It is going to store under the sys file destination OS path, right? I will just show you the show parameter audit. Now as you can see here, this audit underscore trail is the initialization parameter which is set to none. Audit sys operations is always true. That is something but the initialization parameter for the sys based auditing. And there is also one more parameter, the first parameter, which is audit underscore file destination. This is the path at which the OS level auditing, even in the XML level auditing as well as the sys based auditing is something which is stored. As you can see, there is a screenshot where audit trail is not set to none. So that means the audit trail initialization parameter not set, the audit trail is not effective. There is also one more screenshot where we can see the audit underscore trail has been set to DB extended. So I just have a query. I will just copy this query. System altered. Now what we need to do is that we need to shut down. It will take some time, because once you alter the system, we need to restart the database. Okay, now the database is shut down. Let me just close the Oracle SQL developer as well, because we are anyway going to close this, because the database is getting stopped. Let me just start this. So let's wait for a couple of seconds. It takes time to start the database. And once the database is going to start, we will again run the show parameter audit at OS level, as well as I will just connect to the Oracle SQL developer, and we will see whether the audit underscore trail parameter has been changed from none to the DB extended. So our first step will be successful, and then probably we can start with creating the audit policies to check the audit logs. Okay, now let's the database has been started. Let's just check show parameter audit. As you see, the audit underscore trail has been DB extended. It was earlier none. So we have done the step one. Let me quickly go to the Oracle SQL developer as well. I'll just open this. And in the meanwhile, let's just copy the query for Oracle SQL developer to check the audit underscore trail parameter has been changed or not. So yeah, let's go to the pluggable database. Okay, as you see, the audit underscore trail parameter has been changed to db underscore db comma extended. Okay, that's the first step we are done with. Okay, yeah, now let's go to, okay, so I think so this we already explained. There are various parameters. None is not recommended. DB, the database, it is not, the SQL text is not captured. This is recommended. XML, just like a XML format stored on OS, but again SQL text is not captured. XML extended is something which we can look for, and OS stored as a plain text in OS path, but again the SQL text is not captured. So this we already saw. Now I think so I already give you the glimpse of the different level of the audit policies. There were 3 level of the audit policies, or 3 ways. One is a statement level audit policy, there is a object level audit policy, and there is a privilege level audit policy. So just to reiterate, so there are 3. So not necessarily all the 3 needs to be configured. If you configure appropriate audit policy at any of the level, either it's a statement, object, or privileges, that would suffice. So a statement level can be where, let's say, if you want to audit, let's say, insert, update, and delete statements for either all the users, or you can also specify some users, but you cannot specify any table. So it will applicable to all the tables. While the opposite of it is that if you want to specify the tables, it is object level of policy auditing. But in this, you cannot specify the user. So it's exactly opposite to statement as well as object. And privilege is something which are not seen, but it is something where any activity you are doing with privileges, specified privileges in that particular audit policy, that activity is getting captured. Okay. So the tables to see these policies are these 3 queries. Let me just run these queries quickly. Okay. So let's run first the statement level audit policy. Yeah, so right now I'm getting an error because the pluggable database is probably not open. Let me just quickly open the database because we restarted for the audit trail parameter. Okay, now I think this should run. Yeah, okay. So there are policies which are already in there. You can see there are some policies I have just created. This is the statement level audit policy. Object level policy is, probably we can see there are some tables in which the audit policies are always configured, and privilege level audit policy. Okay, so let's just this is blank because there are no privilege level audit policies which are created. So let's just go through this. What columns we need to look for. Let's say for example we run as an auditor the statement level audit policy, right? We can see there are many columns in it, right? So let's just go what is the meaning of each column from auditor perspective. Username is the very important field. Let's say if it is showing a user, for example in this there is a specific user, that means this particular audit policy is applicable to only that user. If you set this username to null, that means you are capturing all the users. Okay, so username very important. Proxy name you can ignore. Audit option again very important. From the rule 11G requirement, you should have a DML. You should capture any changes to the books of accounts made via database directly, right? So to capture that, you can have probably just in this screenshot insert, update, and delete table. So this action should be there, right? If it is a specific user, then for all the users you should have at least 3. Or if it is null, then you can have only insert, update, and delete, because null is anyway ensuring all the users. Success and failure, this is again important. So success means only successful commands will get audited. Failure means if it is even the command is failed, it will get audited. Ideally you don't want any failed commands to audit. but if you want to set, you can set that. Now the values of this can be by access or by session, right? Oracle recommends and the industry best practice is to set it as by access. Now what is the difference between by access and by session? So treat it as like that by session it is nothing but a session, and all the activities you are carrying out during that session, those are combined as a one audit record, right? So in a one session, if you are executing multiple commands, that will have a one audit record, right? That is probably not an ideal scenario as from the auditor perspective. You want, let's say in session there are 5 activities, 5 commands, I want 5 line items in my audit trail, right? And that is something by access will ensure, not the by session. So Oracle and always the industry best practice is to always go with the by access, not with the by session. Okay. Now let me probably I just I think in statement level auditing I already created some already policies, as you can see here, the username and the audit option, right? um, let's move to the object level audit policies, right? Object level policies, as you can see, right, there are many tables in it, right? And what this is basically in the case where you want to specify a table, right? So what we need to make sure is that if this is the something option the entity has chosen, the object type has to be table, because here you can see there is a procedure as well as there is a type, but in this case you can see there is a table. And once you put a filter on object type to table, all the object names is nothing but the table's name, so those should form part of your books of accounts, right? And then we need to look for certain key columns. As you can see, I'm just zooming a little bit. ALT stands for alter, AUD stands for audit. These are nothing but short form of the commands, and for us 3 commands, one is insert, second one is update, and third one is delete, is something which we are looking for. So INS, this is the one, INS, UPD and DEL, yeah, DL, that we should look for. So these three are something which we are concerned about. Now as you can see, the values is a/a. So again, as I mentioned earlier, there can be multiple values. Probably I will just show you in here. Yeah. So A stands for by access, and if it is S, it stands for by session. Okay. Now A/A stands for it will audit both successful as well as unsuccessful. We are okay with it. If it is --A, that means only unsuccessful commands are getting audited. That's an observation. If it is A/dash, we are okay because successful commands are getting logged. You can probably also see S/S or similar lines because it's a by session activity. But again, this is not recommended by the Oracle, and you should always go for the access rather than session. Okay. Right now what we can do is quickly is that I have a table. Let me just check. It's a employees table. Okay, let me just run this. Yeah, we have employees table, and what we can do is that I want to create a audit policy on employees table, right, for all the users, but it should contain the DML activities, so insert or delete. So object level auditing is this. We can just run this. This is the command to create the audit policy. I'm auditing insert or delete on this employees table, and whenever only successful by access. So I got a message audit succeeded. I will just go to the object level quickly, and in this there will be a table called as employees, as you can see at the bottom right. This is owned by sys. This is not necessarily the username to which audit policy is applicable. This is just the schema owner of that particular table. And as you can see, delete, in case of delete it is A/dash, in case of insert it is A/dash, and in case of update it's A/dash, right? So through this we can create a kind of policies. This is also I will just give you a sample. Like this is the command probably we run for statement or audit policy. So in my case is already created. This is the username, right? And this is insert update delete. So let me just probably check if I can disable this and show you how to create the policies, statement level policies. Yeah, I think no audit. I think so this must have removed the audit policies. Okay, no, it is not removing because I think it's removing then the object level policies. Okay, um, got it. But yeah, I think so. In statement level auditing as well, here in this scenario, you can specify the particular user, right? And if it is null, that means it is applicable to all the users. And you can specify insert table. So here I'm not specifying anywhere the particular table name. So this is applicable to all the tables, right? So we just go through for statement level auditing. Okay. Got it. Yeah. So statement level auditing, as we earlier saw, is that there is a username and the audit option. Now, audit option has to be insert, update, delete, which is there in this case, right? And you can have either success or failure. Even only success is sufficient, right? We saw statement level audit policy. We saw object level audit policy. Now let's go to the privilege level audit policy. So right now it's blank, but this is something we don't particularly see as far as rule 11G requirement is concerned. But yeah, you can create a kind of policy which will, let's say, you're telling the database that insert table, update table, and delete table are the three privileges you want to audit. So any actions done through these three privileges will get audited. Yeah. uh, this is just a scenario where audit policies are not created or those are not sufficient. So as you can see, if you run this command, no rules are selected, that means audit policies are not there. So even if, let's say, audit underscore trail parameter is there in place but audit policies are not there, so inefficiently your audit trail at a standard and traditional level auditing is not in place. That's a point. In these cases there are some audit policies but probably not as per the rule 11G requirement, because to some extent audit Oracle also creates some kind of default audit policies, but those are not from the rule 11G requirement, more from a security perspective. Yeah. Okay. Got it. Okay, great. Now let's see the third step. We have created first step was initialization parameters. Second step was creating the audit policies. Now how do we check the audit records, right? So there is a table called as let me just clear this probably. There is a table, or I would say review, because mostly we look for a view rather than a table. It is called as db underscore audit underscore trail, right? I think, okay, let me just go to the test database quickly. Okay, I think so. I just, there was a typo. I need to type from db underscore trail. Yeah. Okay, so this is the table which we are looking for, where all the activities is getting captured. So I'll just quickly show you the, yeah, this is the table, this is the view. You can also use this query to just to apply a filter to your particular audit period, to particular sample days which you're looking for. Now there can be two possibilities. Either the table is blank just like this, that means either the initialization parameter is not set, or the audit policies are not probably configured appropriately, or the probably the this db underscore audit or the this audit logs are purged or archived, right? And it can be a case where probably there is sys based activity only, and since the sys based logs are stored on OS, this table will be MP only, right? Okay, so if it is an MP, then probably there is something wrong that we need to dig into and perform a root cause analysis. Okay, I will just show you sample logs, how it sees. So as you can see in this screenshot, you can see a user ID. So that is who, the timestamp, that is date and timestamp, the when is getting captured, and the text is nothing but the exact SQL command which has been executed by the user. Okay, now um, as I mentioned earlier, we are now sitting in a pluggable database through sysuser. So any activity I do in the this through sysuser ID, that is not getting captured. So even if I create an audit policy on employees table, right, on insert, update, and delete, right? Now let me just quickly show you that. Yeah. So this was a statement to your audit policy. So let's say, for example, even if, let's say, statement to your audit policy is here. Now in this case it is only for one of the user, which is called as click, so that means this policy is applicable only to click. But even if it is null in this case, that means it is applying to all users. Even if the sys user performs any insert, update, delete, that is not going to capture here. This is very important part, because sys based auditing is not stored under db underscore audit trail. It is stored on a OS, for which we saw earlier the parameter called as audit underscore file underscore destination. This is the parameter. We saw this is the path where all the sys based auditing is stored. So that is very important, we need to take into consideration. Okay, yeah, so that was we written is that if it is sys based auditing, we need to look for the similar steps, which is for the scenario number 2, when the audit logs are stored on OS, right? So let's go to the scenario number 2 as nothing but the audit logs where it is stored on OS. So let me go to the SQL Plus. So let's say, for example, this is not a DB extended, but this is, let's say, XML extended or a OS, right? So that means this is the path where you need to look for. Now, in my case, there is no audit logs as such, but I will just copy this path. So there is no, this will be empty, but you will have a folders and logs. I will just probably show you a similar screenshot. Something related to this. If it is set to OS, then it will look like this. .aud files we call it as, and you need to go and in under this file to to capture all the date, timestamp, and all the audit logs. What are the SQL statement passed by the sys user using the sysdb or sys upper privileges. So this is applicable to OS. Very straightforward. Now let's say if it is XML or XML extended, fortunately Oracle has a good table called as XML underscore v dollar XML underscore audit. So let me just run this table quickly for you. So if it is set to XML, so XML and OS, the main difference is the language. XML, it is stored in the XML format, and OS, it is stored as a plain format. But in XML, if it is set to XML, we can actually see the data or the audit records right from the database, because we have a separate view for it, which is not in the case of OS. So in XML also, you can just query this v dollar XML underscore audit trail, and all the columns similar. These columns are very much similar to the db underscore audit trail. If you look at, majority of the columns are very much same as per the db audit trail and the v dollar XML underscore audit underscore trail. Okay, there is a query which you can also use to just filter out probably the respective dates and the which is applicable to your audit period or the sample dates. Okay, now the next step is my favorite and one of the important, is that if I change the initialization parameter audit underscore trail, how I can get the date on which it is changed, because from that date the audit trail is effective. And let's say if it was enabled and it was disabled, that's a case of tampering, and as auditor we should report that, right? Now there are many ways to change this audit underscore trail parameter, but one of the industry based practice and Oracle recommended way is use alter statement. And there is always a log, a default mandatory log, we call it as a alert logs in Oracle methodology, which will capture all the activities which has used the alert statements, right? So to check the path of that alert log, we will just use this query, which will give you path of that alert log. We'll just do a copy, we'll go to that, and this is the path. Now if I open this directly in Edge, it is giving me error because this is very huge file, because all the alert statements are getting captured right from the inception, unless now this file is probably deleted or removed or archived or purged. That is a very case to case basis, where you are not seeing either the alert log file or not the audit trail content in that file. What I will do is that I will just right click and open it with the VS Code, and what we need to look for is in this. So since this is a Windows platform, measured to the scenario, you will see a Linux or Unix platform, right? If it is a Windows platform, you can always double click on the file to get into it, and probably Control F. I will probably write alter system set audit underscore trail. This is usually the execution statement or the start of it. There are 7 instances. Obviously I have tested this before as well, so you can see in 9th October. So let's just go to the last statement, which was, yeah, So this was the statement. This was passed on 15th November 2025, which is the current date. You can also identify the time which is there. And what we did is basically we changed the audit underscore trail parameter from num to db extended. So this was the actual query which was used um, to change that parameter, and you can get that from through the alert log. So from this we can say that the auditor was the initialization parameter was enabled from 15th November 2025. And we can also get if it is disabled, right? So if to disable it, I need to again change it from db extended to none, right? And again through this alter system set audit underscore trail. So this will give you the kind of hint that when the audit trail was actually enabled, the initialization parameter. Okay, so that we saw. Next is so yeah, this is the Windows environment, I think. So let's go to the Linux environment, because this is the most time you will find a Linux environment. So what you need to do is that you need to go to that command directory first of the where the alert log is mentioned. ls-lh will give you the name of the alert log file, and then what I'm doing is here I'm just grabbing the some keywords, which is alter system set audit underscore trail, and c50 will give me the before 50 lines and after 50 lines from that particular basically the keyword. So you can get a similar screenshot like this, where you can identify that this auditor was disabled on 9th October 2025. Yeah. So this was changes in the initialization parameter, changes in the audit policy. So as basically we have, let's say for example, this is the policy, right? Okay. Or let's say for example I want to disable the policy, right? No audit, insert table, update table, and delete table, right? No, so audit will always so this is the audit, right? Audit statement is nothing but a use to create a audit policy. No audit is either disabling or removing the audit policy. So as you can see, no audit is succeeded, right? So that means I'm disabling the audit. Now ideally auditor should also get the instances on which audit policies are disabled, right? So in traditional auditing, if it is the version is less than 19.26, there is no way to find out any logs. But let's say if the version is probably greater than or equal to 19.26, we have a query where you can kind of get the changes or audit logs relating to the changes in audit policies. Again, it is going back to the unified audit trail. We will come back why it is routing to the unified audit trail. But yeah, if it is greater than 19.26, you can kind of find out. So how to check the version, I'll just show you quickly. Is this query, and you can just run this. In my case it's 19.3, so it is less than 19.26 version. So that means in this databases we won't be able to get any logs of enabling or disabling of audit policy. Do mind there's a difference between initialization parameter and audit policy. In standard auditing we can get the changes to the initialization parameter, but we cannot get the changes to the audit policy. Again, that is subject to the version of the database. Yeah, I think so. This was for the standard auditing. I know it is probably a little bit complex if you go for the first time, but yeah, as you audit many clients or at the part of implementation, things might get easy, right? We will quickly jump to the next topic, which is nothing but our fine-grained auditing. Again, I would say brother or sister of traditional auditing, because this was similarly introduced when the traditional auditing was launched or given by the Oracle. And the main objective of fine-grained auditing is always to probably have some kind of conditions. In traditional standard auditing, we always saw we can maximize, give a specific user a specific table, a specific statements, right? But I want to go one more level further. I want to specify a particular column of a table. I want to specify a condition where the, let's say, salary of an employee whose name is click is, if it is changed from 10,000 to another value, and the difference between that change in salary is more than 20%, then I want to log that audit. So this is the scenario where you want to go with the FGA. We call it popularly as FGA auditing, right? And yeah, so just there is no initialization parameter per se in FGA. We will directly go through the audit policies. So let's go with this and let's check. So this is the query where all the audit policies are captured for FGA. I'll just delete this and run this. Okay, as you see, there is no policies as such, right? We'll just quickly create a policy, right? I think let me just create a policy, and I'll just explain you what I'm actually creating in policy. Where are the conditions, basically configured. Object schema is nothing but the schema of the table. Employees is a table. This is the name of the policy. I'm giving condition that this is applicable only when the employee ID is 2, right? So whatever the audit policy is applicable only when the employee ID is 2 and to a particular column which is salary. And I'm giving all the statements which is DML, also the select, and I'm specifying that it has to be enabled, right? So let's just run this quickly. We got a completion message. We'll just see that. Okay, so as you can see, there is a policy which has been already created. First thing you need to look for is whether, as an auditor, whether it is enabled or not. So this is the column we should look for, whether it is enabled or not. Second thing you want to look for is whether the object name is the particular table on which books of accounts are maintained or not, right? That's the name. Policy name you can look for. Policy text and column is also very important because these are the conditions. Fulfillment of those conditions only will trigger the FGA auditing, right? And you can see here INS UPT delete all the statements which we have configured. There are other columns as well which are very important. One is the audit underscore trail. So I think so I have explained it here. All the columns we saw this one, yeah. So audit underscore trail is nothing but the location of the audit trail. So if it is DB plus extended, that means it is storing on a DB, but again SQL text is getting captured, which is good. If it is XML or XML extended, it is stored on a OS in XML format. And there is this table XML audit trail. I think this is the same table we saw in the XML audit trail in traditional. So yeah, as I mentioned earlier, this is like a brother and sister of traditional auditing. They do share some similarities between them. Okay, so this is the V dollar XML audit trail, and SQL text and SQL binder getting captured. So these are the first two columns which you look for. Right? If the policies are not in place, then that's the first step which is getting failed. So that means no FGA is there. But if it is there, then we need to look for appropriate policies are created or not. Okay. Okay. Now let's just check this record. Select star from DBA. So there is a table called as select star from DBA underscore FG underscore trail, which is specifically for FG audit trail. You can see there are some activities on 14th October. There was some testing on 15th November. Before recording this video, I just tried to do some activity. What we'll do is that we'll just quickly jump to the click user and do some activities, because click I'm just using because this is, if you see, the schema owner is click. So what we'll do is that probably we will just check first of all the employees table. Yeah, and the condition is attached to Jan, which is because the employee ID is 2, and on the salary column. So what I'm doing is probably, let's say I just change that to 1 lakh salary. Okay, and let's just check now. This 60,000 to 1 lakh salary has been changed. Okay, and we have a policy which is ideally supposed to capture any insert update delete on the probably employees table on salary column where the employee ID is 2. So this is fulfilling all my conditions. So let's just quickly go to this. As you see, there is activity. Since I use select as well command, so this was the command actually which we use, update employees where the salary is to 1 lakh, and this is the SQL statement. Probably you can also see the date and timestamp. Yeah, 15th November is the date and timestamp, and the user is click. So yeah, that is getting captured. So this is the way you can, this is a very simple and layman example for FGA auditing. Okay, now if it is, let's say this unified auditing is enabled, we will obviously go through unified auditing. But as I mentioned earlier, if unified auditing is enabled, then this table is going to be empty because the records are going to move to the unified audit trail. So that's what I mentioned here. So if it is enabled, then you need to look for the unified underscore audit trail, not this table. But yeah, the exact logs will getting moved to that table particular. Now, since this audit policies can be either created, enabled, disabled, and deleted, if it is the unified auditing is not enabled by default, just similar to traditional auditing, it does not capture any changes in the audit policies. Okay, but let's say if it is enabled, the unified auditing is enabled, then you can see the changes. So there is a query. What it is doing is basically it's querying the unified underscore auditor and that view, and there is a particular object which is called as dbms underscore fga. So there is a query and there is a output which I have captured, where we can see if any policy has been created, if it has been dropped, that means deleted, if it has been enabled or disabled, that kind of activity can be captured. But for this you require unified auditing to be enabled in a pure mode. What is pure mode, what is mixed mode is something which we are going to see, and I will going to explain under the unified auditing. That's the last part of this video. But as of now, you can just try to understand that if unified auditing is enabled and at the same time you're trying to create any kind of FGA policies, then all the auditorial records or even any kind of changes in the audit policies, those are something which will be maintained under a unified underscore audit underscore trail table, not the traditional DBA underscore FGA underscore audit trail table. That's a very important point. Okay, we are done through the FGA auditing. The next part is the trigger, which is very important but not applicable to most of the entities because of the performance issues it has over the years. But let me just quickly run through this part as well. So from the auditor's perspective, so again there are two types of triggers, you can say before trigger, after trigger. uh, we would like to always as auditor have the after triggers in place, and again to further deep dive DML triggers and DDA triggers which I explained earlier. So as an auditor, what we should do is first of all obtain a list of tables forming part of books of accounts, because trigger is to be created on each table, right? And to capture the DML activity, there are three commands: insert command, update command, and delete command. So there, for each table forming part of books of account, there has to be at least three triggers. One is the insert trigger, update trigger, and delete trigger. To get the list of the triggers, we have this beautiful command, which is again going to the views called a db underscore triggers. I will just remove this quickly. Yeah. So these are the triggers. Some of the triggers are always created, and I believe I have created. I believe query. I have created a few triggers before recording this session for employees table. So yeah, these three are the triggers which I have already created. What we need to look for is the name of the trigger, very important. Second one is the triggering event. I'm covering insert, update, and delete. The next question is for which table. The table name is employees. That is very important, right? So you can get actually this query to and get the Excel dump, and then based on that you need to analyze on all the tables forming part of books of accounts where the triggers are getting captured or not. If you scroll down, I think you will be able to see. Yeah, there are these three are created right now. Okay, now the next step is the question is when these are created, because the date of the creation is also important, because from that date my the auditor is effective, right? So there is another query where we can see the date creation. Okay, so as you can see, these are all the triggers, and we can see the creation date and last date. So let's just scroll a little bit to find out our trigger. So we had created these triggers. I can get the date of creation 15 November, but for this, but the last detail time is the last modification date. So let's say even if I change the name of the trigger, it will capture the last detail time. So last detail time might be false positive. So let's say for example, if you want to capture a tampering of the triggers, I mentioned earlier that DMA triggers doesn't capture, and if you drop a trigger, if you delete a trigger or enable or disable the trigger, ideally DMA triggers are not that much capable. You need to create a DDA trigger, and that is not default in nature. Okay, but yeah, from this you can ideally get the date of the creation, which can be very important in nature. What we'll do is that probably we will again change this employees table. So I will just go to employees. This is 1 lakh, or I'll just change it to, let's say, 20 lakh probably. Let's make this employee very happy. 1 2 is updated, and 20 lakh. And now, so okay, before that, I think so we changed that, but I want to see the triggers where you can see that. So this is the employees trigger. I think we can see here the triggers. Yeah. So what I would do is that I'm just going to the click uh, database, and as you can see there are three triggers, right? So this is the actual command which we use to execute to create the trigger, and this is the configuration where you are telling the database set to create the trigger, and there has to be history table. So this is the table which is already created, employees underscore history. So any kind of old values is mentioned in that. So you can see that. And now since I think so the new value has been changed, what we'll go is that I'll just go select star from employees underscore history. That's a table or history table we call it as, which has been configured in trigger. Okay, I think so this has to be star. Okay, as you can see, the last statement, the old value was one. It's a 10 lakh or 1 lakh. I believe it's 1 lakh. Okay, so 1 lakh was the old salary and 2 lakh was the new salary. And this is we are also getting the action and the username and the date and timestamp. Right. So this is the way we can also create the triggers. Quite impressive as far as Rule 11G requirement is concerned, but not practical because the performance and because see, triggers are something which are going to always run in the background because they need to check whether any kind of insert or delete is passed on tables, and there are probably not one single tables, right? We need to capture measure most tables on which the books of accounts is maintained, right? So the volume of the data considering that triggers can be implemented in a small complex a small environment, but in case the volume is very large and the complex environment, it is not recommended to go for either the earlier mechanisms which we saw or the unified audit trail which we are going to quickly jump into. Yeah, so let me just check if in the triggers are we missing anything. I will just explain. I think so we saw the first query output. What we should do is that basically once we get the Excel dump, we need to apply the filter to object type to tables. We are getting the name of the table. Just cross verify with the books of accounts. Before that, there is a column called as status. Very important. First, we need to apply filter to status. Make sure only those triggers we are scoping in which are enabled in state. Then apply the filter to the object type, which will have to table, so that we will get the name of the table. And then we need to cross verify those tables with the books of accounts tables. We need to also see the triggering event. Update, delete, and insert should be in place here. And we can also get the date of the creation from this second query we saw. Last date time is something can be false positive, but let's say for example, if the creation date is false within your audit period, then from that period probably the triggers were created and indirectly the auditor is effective from that period. If let's say a last deal time or last modification time is follows under your audit period, you need to obviously check with the client or the entity why there was is there any change which was done into that trigger. What change is something the system is not capturing or the database is not capturing, but uh, that is something case to case basis you need to discuss with the entity or the client to understand. This we already mentioned. Yeah, this is the important step. You need to again perform a walkthrough with the DBA, just like what we just did. Probably you can check in a test environment or probably production environment to make any kind of small changes and check whether the triggers are effective and it's capturing all the aspects move what when of the audit trail. And step 5, as I earlier mentioned, tampering is something you by default cannot capture unless a DDA trigger specifically has been created, which will capture any dropping or deleting of trigger, enabling of trigger, and disabling of trigger. Creation itself is there, so we are okay if ever the creation is not captured in the DDA trigger. Okay, then I think so. It's now time to the most recommended method by Oracle, and I think so. This is something which is very, very, very. I would say uh, compliant with the rule energy because it is it is easy to implement. Probably it is also easy for auditors to check the unified auditing.
Okay. So unified auditing is something which Oracle is recommending from a long point of time. In 23C, they have depreciated and desupported the traditional auditing, thereby pushing the people to move to the unified auditing. So how do we enable the unified auditing? So just like in traditional auditing, we have a initialization parameter called as audit underscore trail. There is a unified auditing parameter, which is the global parameter. So let's just see first of all the default value of this parameter. So I'm just putting this query and the SQL developer. So right now is false. So the default value is false. Now what can be the possible values? It can be either true or false. Now what do you mean by true or false? So in unified auditing, there can be two possible ways. Either the unified auditing is enabled in mixed mode or pure mode. So whenever the value is true, that means the unified auditing is in pure mode. So pure mode means only unified auditing is enabled. Rest of the traditional auditing, rest of the sys based auditing, and rest of the your fine grained based auditing is disabled, right? And if it is in mixed mode, that means false. It is the word suggests mix. It is like traditional plus unified plus fine grained plus sys based. Okay, so ideally, as per the rule 11G requirement and also the Oracle, pure mode has to be enabled. That means the value has to be true in case if we want to say unified auditing is fully effective. Okay. Uh, Next, what we can do is that once now in this scenario we have also we'll just make it true. Now it can be depend upon the environment. Now we are sitting in a Windows environment, but most of the time it will be either a Linux or Unix environment. But let's say in Windows environment we want to make it to enable. So what I will be doing is that I will just probably need to close this. Just probably yes. Okay. What we will need to go is that we need to go to the services.msc. We are going to stop the services first of all related to the Oracle. So in Oracle there are, okay, let's stop this. Let's stop this as well. Stop this and stop this as well. This service will take some time to stop. Okay, this is stop. Now what we will do is that we need to go to the Oracle DB directory. So this is my Oracle database directory and we need to search for a file. Now that file name is written here. We just go down. Yeah, this is the one. Now the file name is ora uni aud 19.dll, right? 19 stands for the name of the version of the database. So I'm setting in 19c, so it's a 19. If you are in 12, it will be ora uni aud 12.dll. So ideally, since the default value is false, the file name, if I just search, it will be ora uni aud 19.dll.dbl. So there will be another extension .dbl, right? So that indicates the unified auditing is a mixed mode. That is the value is false. In order to make it true, we need to remove this dbl. Now this is applicable only in the Windows environment. In the Linux and Unix environment, these steps are not going to applicable. So depending upon the environment, since this is not an implementation session, we are going to skip that part. So I'm just changing that, and right now let's just restart all the services which we stopped. Okay, now these services are started. So let's go to the Oracle SQL developer and let's see if we can establish a database connection. Okay, now let's just see the input which we check for the first step. Now this should be true ideally since we have enabled it. Yeah, now as you can see the value is true. That means the unified auditing is fully enabled, that is in pure mode. This is the first step. As auditor, we should check whether the parameter has been enabled or not. Now this next step is to again check for the audit policies. So okay, before going that, there is a beautiful table which I have drafted here. So it just kind of a summary of how the unified auditing and traditional auditing works together. Let's say if the unified auditing parameter is true. Now, irrespective of whether whatever the value you set in traditional auditing, be it a none, DB, DB extended, XML, XML extended, or OS, If this is the unified auditing is in true, that means it's in pure mode. That means only unified auditing is enabled, and all the audit records, be it assist-based auditing, traditional auditing, or MCA auditing, those are going to move to the unified underscore audit underscore trail table. Now, let's say if unified auditing parameter is set to false and traditional auditing is set to anything other than none, that means it's in mixed mode. That is traditional auditing as well as sys-based auditing, FGA, and unified audit trail all are in place, but in separate the respective tables. If unified auditing is also false and traditional auditing is probably also set to none, that means no auditing is enabled. Okay, next step is obviously we are going to check the unified auditing policy. This is the table which will give you the list of all the policies which are enabled. So let's just check. So by default, Oracle creates two policies. Okay, so I think so we need to first of all just open the pluggable database quickly. I will just open that. Okay, now let's see this output. So by default, Oracle creates two policies, Aura Secure Config and Aura Logon Failures. Now these policies are enabled, but those are from the security perspective, not from the Rule 11G perspective. So in order to meet the Rule 11G requirement, a custom policy is something which is very mandatory to create. Now, in while creating the custom policies, there can be two scenarios or two possible ways to comply with this. Either you tell the policies to audit all the actions for all the users, or you, if you want to, let's say, be specific with the tables, because again Oracle will have thousands of the tables, and if you want to scope in only few tables forming part of books of accounts and you want to enable auditor for that only tables, then you can enable that only for specific tables as well. So we will quickly create two policies. I will just show you how that will work. Okay, so in unified auditing, let's create a policy named as all audit policy, and it will audit all the actions. So this is the statement to create the policies. So the name of the policy is all underscore audit underscore policies, and actions is all. That means all the actions are going to be uh, captured by these policies. Okay. Okay. There was some typo in between, so the audit policy has been created. Now the funny fact is that if I again view this all the policies table, I'm not seeing any policies which are just created. So the fact is that whenever you create a policy, you're just creating the policy. There is a specific command to enable the policies, and since the table is audit underscore unified underscore enable policies, this is going to list only the policies which are in enable state. So it is very important to just not to create the policies but to enable as well. Then only it will be probably effective. So I'm just enabling the audit policy, and now let's see this table. As you can see, there is a third policy, all underscore audit policy. Important columns we need to look for is the entity name, all users. That means it is applicable to all the users. And I am interested only in success commands. But yeah, in this case, we have just capturing both the whether the successful commands as well as the failed commands. Okay. Now, next step is from this table, I'm not able to get understanding whether this policy is for a specific table or for all the actions. We have specified all actions while creating the policy. So there is another query which we can just execute, which will give you all the actions which are associated or configured in that particular audit policy. So we just need to put here the name of the policy. Okay. And we will just run this. It will take some time to query the result. As you can see, the policy name is all underscore audit policy, and the important column is audit underscore option. It is set to all. Object name, object type are none because this is set to all. That means all the objects. So it is applicable to tables, procedures, even views. Any action taken by any user, it is going to capture all, right? This is one of the mechanisms through which you can compliance the rule MG requirement. Let's see the other mechanism where we want to be very specific with some of the tables. But before that, we will just disable and drop this policy. So there are two statements. One is no audit. No audit is going to kind of disable the audit policy, and the drop audit is going to remove the audit policy. So we just execute both these commands, and let's just execute this command, so that policy has been gone. Okay, now let's create one more audit policy. Now this is on the employees table, and we are going to give the DML command as the action. So any insert or update or delete done on the employees table, that is going to be the scope of this policy. So just create this. Okay, let's, I think there is some typo in this, so let's just fix that. Yeah, this should fix the issue. Yeah, so audit policy has been created, and let's just also enable this policy. Yeah, so audit has been successful. So yeah, as you can see, the employee underscore DML policy is there. So again, the question remains is that how we can check the actions which has been associated with it. So I'm just using the similar query which we use for the audit policy, and once we run this query, we'll get to know the insert, update, delete. Those three actions are configured in this policy and on the table which is named as employees. So as you can see, the audit option is insert, update, delete, and the object name is nothing but the name of the table which is employees. So ideally in your cases, this object name should form part of your all the list of the tables forming part of books of accounts, and for each table there has to be at least three audit actions: insert, update, and delete. Okay. Then I think so. The next part is, since we have enabled the initialization parameter, we have created the audit policy. What we will do is that we will just update, one of the records from the employees. So I'll just select star from employees. We'll just see what is data sitting in employees table. So we have here the data for the employees and the particular salary. What I'll do is just that I will just update the salary of employee ID 2. So the earlier value is 2 lakhs, and let's just reduce it to probably 1 lakh. One row has been updated. So let's just see quickly. Yeah, so this value has been changed. And now let's just see the unified underscore audit trail. So the base table is AUD, as well as that's a schema, AUD dollar unified, but mostly we use the view which is unified underscore audit underscore trail. So we have a query which we can use for if you want to query the audit records for a particular period of time or for the sample days. So let me just quickly put the today's date so that we are seeing only the relevant audit records. Okay, now once I execute this, okay, so let's just scroll a little bit, and at the downside, the right side, yeah, okay. So I believe this was the statement which we executed: update employee set salary 1 lakh where employee ID is 2. Let's just see if we can see the date, time, and the username. So username is we can see the update action. Uh, this is the time event timestamp we can see here, and also the DB username is the name of the user who has done the activity. And let's say if this table is empty, right? In that particular scenario, it can be a case where the appropriate audit policies are not configured, or the table has been archived or moved to some another table space, or the table has unified auditor has been purged. Okay. There is one more optional query which you can choose that will just give you the earliest audit date and the latest audit date in the unified audit trail. Quite be helpful, where you want to just get a high level idea from where the records are starting from. So that's the oldest value and newest value. Okay. Now changes made to the initialization parameters. Now there can be two scenarios. Either in the Windows environment, we saw this file we had changed. So in Windows environment, you need to again go to the root directory where the Oracle database is sitting. You need to search for this file, and you can just right click on it and go for the properties. There is a window access, last access. So since it is saying that this file was accessed lastly on 15th November 2025. That is a kind of indication an auditor can take that there is some change in the parameter. Either it is changed from pure mode to mixed mode or vice versa. Now, most of the cases, as I earlier mentioned, it will be a Linux or Unix environment. So in that cases, you need to run this command, which is indirectly giving you the same access and modified date of that particular file from which you can get a idea. Okay. Now, since these audit policies can be, created, they can be created using create audit policy command. To enable, we have to use audit. We can modify the audit policy as well. We can disable and delete the audit policy as well, right? Now, unlike the traditional auditing or standard auditing or FGA, where they were suffering whenever the logs for changes in audit policies were come into picture. But in the case of the unified auditing, this is pretty much default audited. So that's one of the very main advantage of unified auditing over other mechanism. So I'm just going to run this command quickly. And if we just scroll to the right side, we can going to see where there is a create audit policy, there is a drop, there is enablement of the audit policy, there is disablement of the audit policy. Those kind of um, um, audit logs are available, and this can be very much helpful. Um, Next is very important. Again, this is something which unified auditing is in because so basically, let's say if you want to purge the unified auditing, if the entity has purged or deleted the unified audit trail, is there any way we can check if that kind of cleanup activity was performed during the audit period? The answer is very much yes. So before that, what we'll do is that we'll just see the unified audit trail, how much is the record. So let's just run this. There are 32 records. What I'm going to do is basically I'm going to clean up the 32 records. Okay, so I'm just going to run this query for the cleanup purpose. And as you can see, the PL and squares procedure has been completed. So let's just see in the unified audit trail the records. It should be 0 ideally, but you might get surprised. There is only one record. So there were 32 records and there is only one record. The funny fact is that the 32 records are deleted, but the unified audit trail has captured one log activity saying that on this date, this time, this activity was performed. So cleanup activities was performed. So we can see the date and timestamp and the exact SQL text which was used to clean up the activities also getting captured. This is another fantastic area where the unified auditing is acing with others. And lastly, again, in traditional auditing and even in FJ, you can, so all the audit trail is sitting in case of traditional auditing, it's sys.audit dollar table. In case of the FG auditing is db underscore FG underscore audit trail, right? Those are the two table services where the audit records from respective mechanisms are stored, and we can pass any DML activity over this. So we can have a situation where a user is manipulating the audit records, existing audit records. But in unified auditing, if we try to execute any kind of DML commands on this table, the underlying table of the unified audit trail, it just Oracle just doesn't allow it. It just says an error that DML and DDL operations are not allowed on this unified audit trail table. That kind of also gives indirectly supports any kind of manipulation in the unified audit trail is something which is not allowed. So I think so from the overall perspective, from all the four methods, I believe if one needs to go for, I think unified audit trail is something from the rule 11G perspective, and also I think so it makes both the lives easier from the client perspective, easy to implement, from the auditor perspective, easy to check, and always have more efficiency and more effective performance as well. On the other side is the Oracle is also pushing, so you get support from the vendor as well. Yeah. So the main objective of this video is again to assist the auditors, to how to check the database audit trail in specifically in Oracle, and to some extent I also kind of helped people probably to implement. I hope you got the idea. If you like this video, please make sure to like, and if you have any kind of comment, do let me know in the comment section. I will try to solve this queries. Have a good day. Thank you so much. Bye bye.